Hey there, everybody. This is Ron, and I'm back for the lesson of the week. And this week's lesson is going to be on when to use an attorney and where to find them. This is a question that I get a lot wherever I do an event. So let's start first by where to find them. Well, I will tell you this. If you go and find the wrong attorney, they will give you bad information. They will give you information that could even take you out of the loop completely. I've seen this happen, and you got to be very careful about where you find attorneys, and of course how you also find out if they're the right ones to work with. The best way to find them is to ask other people in real estate who they're using for their attorneys. If you're a part of an association, a real estate association, a REIA group, anywhere in the country, start asking the people around that are doing deals. Don't ask the people that aren't doing deals. They don't know anything. Ask the people that are doing deals. You know who they are. They're in every single group. And I'll bet you if you ask 5 or 6 of them in the room who they use for an attorney, you'll get at least 2 of the same name. So that's how I found my attorney. I strongly suggest that's how you found yours, or find yours. When you do that, you've taken advantage of all of the pre-screening that they've done for you, not knowing it, and probably circumvented an awful lot of crap that you got to go through to find somebody that you can work with. If you find 2 or 3 people that give you the same attorney's name, you found an attorney that is user-friendly for investors and not looking every way they can to kill everything you do. Now let's talk about when you need an attorney. Well, let me get to that in a second, but first, what do I want to see happen between you and your attorney? What kind of relationship do I want to see you build? And I can tell you, one thing that I look for is the ability to communicate without having totally direct personalities. You cannot work with somebody that's got a totally direct personality of yours and like the way the conversations go. If I'm working with an absolute thinker brain, someone who just wants to analyze everything to death, it's all I can do to just keep my head in the game long enough to get through it in a conversation. I would much rather work with an aggressive attorney. I want somebody that gets it done and is looking to do everything they can to make the deal work and not kill the deal. I understand that attorneys have to be the devil's advocate. They have to tell you what could go wrong. It's their job to protect you from the outside predators. And I'm certainly not advising that we try to take that away from them. I want them to do that. But I also want them to be in a position to where they can help us get stuff done. Don't tell me why it won't work. Don't tell me it won't work. Tell me why it won't work. Tell me what law would it violate. Tell me what my real risks are, not the perceived risk 1 out of a million chances. I want to know what the reality is. And when you run across attorneys that tell you that this real estate stuff don't work here, or that land trusts don't work. Land trusts, I don't care about. If they talk you out of a land trust and use an LLC, and let's not have any more conversation about that. I could care less about that. But I do care, for example, when they give you a hard time about closings. For example, some attorneys won't close on subject to deals. If you got an attorney that won't close on a subject to deal, you've got the wrong attorney, because it does not put the attorney in jeopardy to do that. Go find another attorney. If you've got an attorney that's giving you a hard time about doing wraparound mortgages or anything like that, you got the wrong attorney. Any good real estate attorney understands all this stuff, they're familiar with it, and they know how to do it and do it properly. Same with you Canadians. You Canadians, this agreement for sale, you got so many attorneys up there that don't have any idea what it is, so they try to talk you out of it. Just be careful that when an attorney tries to nick something that you're bringing to them, make sure that the question that they're answering for you is the question that you intended for them to hear. Many times there's a problem with the translation. A question is asked by a student, an attorney interprets the question in a different way, therefore gives a different answer than that which is intended. For example, let's take this land trust thing for a minute. A lot of attorneys poo-poo land trust because they think, you think, that they're an asset protection device, and they're not. They're just the first step of asset protection, and that's only to get the property out of your name so you have privacy. I've always told everybody that a predator could come and get your beneficial interest in the land trust. It's a first step. But of course, if you go in and say, will a land trust work here? First of all, a lot of attorneys will say no because there's no statute concerning land trust, when in reality there doesn't have to be a statute. And then they'll go give you this, well, it's not an asset protection device, you've been through too many seminars. Well, they're right. It's just the first step of it. But anyway, the point is, I want you to be very careful about what you hear. You have the right to question it, and make sure that at least the attorney understands the question the way you meant for it to be understood before you just accept the answer blindly. And then here's one I always like to ask, well, can you tell me what statute that violates and where I can get my hands on it? And if they can't tell you what statute that it violates, it's likely that they're just passing along information that they heard, and they really don't even know for sure that that's the real facts. So one, I want them to be user friendly. That means that we got to be able to communicate. And two, I always have this pre-hiring conversation with an attorney about returning phone calls. In my opinion, if I'm going to pay somebody money and hire them to do a job, I have every right to expect a return call when I call them. And I'm talking about within the first day, not 3 or 4 days later. In my opinion, an attorney who can't call me, it takes 3 or 4 days and 2 or 3 times chasing them down, is not somebody I'm going to work with. And I'll tell you point blank, I've fired several attorneys because they just refuse to be cooperative in that respect. Look, when people call me and I want to call them back, I call them back, especially if they're giving me money. I don't expect any less out of my attorney. If I need answers, I need answers. Now, it doesn't mean I want to be a pain in the neck, but I want to make it very, very clear up front that I expect a return call in a reasonable amount of time. I expect a return email in a reasonable amount of time. And the minute that I got to start chasing you, I'm going to start looking for someone else, because apparently you don't treasure my business enough to even respond to me in a courteous kind of manner. So I'm looking for somebody who gets this real estate stuff. I want somebody who can communicate with me, and someone who I don't have a problem getting on the telephone with for a while. And it's not all I can do to force myself to go through the drudgery. So that's about the size of that. So we've talked about where to find them. We've talked about what I'm looking for. Now let's talk about when to use them. All right. Here's the real simple answer to that question. Anytime that you have an ongoing relationship with your seller or your buyer, you better make darn sure you get an attorney involved in all 50 states and all provinces of Canada. Make sure an attorney closes a transaction for your own protection. If I'm buying subject to, I want an attorney to close it. If I'm buying with owner financing, or I want an attorney to close it. If I'm selling with owner financing, if I'm lease optioning the property out, I want an attorney to close it. Now there's one exception. When we do these AX deals and we get these lease option agreements signed by the seller, we are going into the home, getting the lease option agreement signed by the seller, and then we bring an attorney in when we bring the buyer in. The tenant buyer goes to the attorney's office, closes it, that's the transaction in front of the attorney, and then the attorney contacts the seller. I insist that the attorney have a conversation with the seller to make sure that they understood everything, and to get any other disclaimers or disclosures signed that the attorney wants signed that we didn't get signed inside of the house. For example, I want a general release from the seller and a general release from the buyer from signing my contract. We get those signed usually when we bring in the buyer. Because on an AX deal, if we don't bring in a buyer, we don't have a deal anyway. So I'm not concerned about getting the attorney involved until I know that there's a real deal there. Now look, when I'm paying cash for a house, I like to get an attorney involved because I want an attorney to check my title, make sure that my title is good. And just because you're getting it from the bank, guys and gals, does not mean that it's good. I want my attorney to do his own title search, compare it to their title policy, even if they're paying for their policy, and make sure we don't have any discrepancies there. Look, it costs very little to get an attorney involved in real estate closings. And when I'm selling it on a lease purchase, it costs me nothing, because my tenant buyer is paying the $200 or $300 or $400 fee to do the lease option agreement. So I don't have to pay at all. So why wouldn't I use an attorney? But here's the reason that I want you to use an attorney. Number one, let the attorney do the agreements. That's what they do. And then you know they're done right. I'm sure you're going to use my agreements, but you're going to send them to your attorney that first time and let him check it over to see if there's anything he needs to add or subtract. From that point on, it's just a cookie cutter. But I want the attorney completing the agreements. I want the attorney making sure that all disclosures and disclaimers that you need in your state are signed by both parties, by all parties. And I want an attorney to explain this to my tenant buyer and or to my seller, and make sure that all parties are clear and that everything is signed off on, so that if there's ever any comebacks, it was done right, it was closed with a professional, the agreements were created by a professional. And what great witness if I ever need a witness to defend myself because one of these parties decided they didn't like the deal 3 years after it was done. So please, for your own benefit, let an attorney close your transactions for you. Even if you have to come out of pocket and pay, it's not a big deal, it doesn't cost that much, and you can go to bed at night knowing that it was done correctly by professionals, and you don't have to worry about, did I do this agreement wrong or did I leave something out? Guys and gals, there's laws in all states, especially when there's foreclosures involved. There are also other laws concerning real estate, and I would prefer that you let an attorney make sure you don't violate any of those laws. So I hope that was of help to you. We get a lot of requests to answer that question, so there it is, answered. See you on the next lesson.